In this question, we're given some information about student memberships at two golf courses, one in grid form and one in table form. And then we have to determine which of the statements here correctly describes the two relationships. We're told that the relationships are linear, and if we look through the statements, we can see that they're all dealing with things such as variation and initial value. So this gives us some direction, and if we can just draw a grid and figure out what is the initial value and what is the variation involved with each of the courses. Well, let's look at course 1 first. It's probably the easiest one to do because it is a grid. And we know that if it was going to be a direct variation, then the line would go through the origin here. Well, it doesn't in this case, so it must be partial variation. So we'll write that down. And then if we look at the line, we can see that it's crossing the vertical axis at the value 10. So that represents our initial value. So we write that down. In this case, it's $10. Now let's look at the second golf course. Well, we know that it's a linear relationship. So we can say that the rate of change would equal the change in C divided by the change in N. In other words, the change in the vertical axis divided by the change in the horizontal axis, the rise over the run. Well, we could look at the difference between any of the values. Why don't we choose these couple right there? So the change in C would be 85 minus 51, which would be 34. And the change in N would be 5 minus 3, or 2, which we can reduce to 17. What that means is that each game we play will cost us $17. So how do we use this information to determine if it's partial or direct variation and the initial value? Well, we could draw a grid here, again, that looks at the total cost and the number of games played, and start by adding values like 0, 1, 2, and 3 for the number of games played. We know that the total cost after 3 games is $51, so let's add that to our table. So after 3 games, total cost $51. And since the rate of change is $17 per game, after 2 games, the cost would be $17 less than 51, which would be $34. And again, if we go backwards, after 1 game it would be $17 less than 34, which would be $17. And then after no games played, 17 less would be 0. And so for golf course 2, our initial value is 0. And we can see for initial value of 0, it goes through the origin, therefore this is direct variation. So let's go through our statements to see which one is true. And indeed, C is the right answer. The first course is partial variation with an initial value of $10, and the second is direct variation.